You're live on Newsroom Africa. It's a pleasure to have you with us tonight. We continue our special dialogue that's brought to you by the Soul City Institute for Social Justice. It's focusing tonight on the 16 days of gender-based violence against women and children. That campaign, of course, kicking off from the 25th of November right through until the 10th of December. So it's time now to bring in more of our audiences to get their comments and feedback. We'll also be showing some of the comments that you've been giving us. This is on social media. We'll get to that in a moment, but let's perhaps kick it off in studio. I've got the lady in the black cap that's had her hand up, and we'll work our way then to the back. Sure.
Okay, my name is Omkhetsi once again. So my question goes out to the whole app that helps with tracking people with danger and whatnot. So how does this affect us? Perhaps maybe dialing a number. Are we even sure that we're going to get help at the same time? You know, because emergency is emergency, and are you guys trustworthy?
Sure. And I think that's an important question about trust and technology, because you are interfacing with a system and not a human. Joanne, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, so Rainbow isn't an app. Rainbow is a chatbot, and it's quite different. So you don't download it from an app store, and it's not meant to serve as an emergency or an emergency device or an emergency application where you press on a button like Nomola, for instance, and someone comes to your rescue, or phones to see if you're okay. Rainbow is not that at all. It's a chatbot companion that uses artificial intelligence to try and guide the user on what the signs of abuse are and how to seek help. And they have access to resources that they can use. On the data question, excellent question. It always comes up, and yes, you need data to be able to access the Facebook Messenger platform. We recognize that, and we know that we can't be all things to all people. We would love it if data wasn't as expensive as what it is in South Africa. Hurrah! But data is required.
I know that Major General Linda can also speak to the issue of apps, because the police have developed an app that is supposed to also act as a first about that app.
Thank you, Cathy, for the opportunity. On the 25th of October, the SAPS have launched My SAPS app. It takes you to different police stations, gives you all access to communicate with the nearest police station to where you are. You can Google it, it's there already.
Sure.
The Namola app has actually been heralded as one of the most responsive apps. And I think there isn't one app that is going to take the problem away, but in fact, what Rainbow does, which which Sage is in partnership with Soul City to develop, is that it is a companion that you have in your hand. So many people are not able to go to a social worker, which is the problem that we spoke about earlier, to ask the questions. That artificial intelligence is going to answer some of the very basic questions that people have, but also link you to help. And I think in a country where in rural areas, in some marginalized communities, people do not have access, to information or access to social workers, the apps work. But I think the question that is being asked about gender speaks to how intersectional this problem is. We can't have on one level technology advancing in the manner that we have been hearing right now, but data being so exorbitantly expensive. So even data that is expensive in South Africa is violence. So you can link everything to violence.
All right, let me go back to our audience. Yes.
It's good to be on this side as an audience member, right? I will be remiss if I don't answer her question on the criminal justice system and its hindrance for women not to report, right? The criminal justice system in this country is a barrier. It's also expensive, right? And that's why when you want to report a case, we advise that we accompany you, because it's intimidating to walk into a police station and you just see General Linda with the there's just aggression that you see, right? So it's intimidating, and we have to work on it. And you also what it does, it forces women to find alternative ways of protesting, name and shame, right? So we'll take the law into our own hands because you're not helping us out, right? So when the women decide to name and shame the men on Twitter, right, 9,000 men who misbehaved, who are perpetrators, who are rapists, then everyone stands up and say, you are against the law. You can't name and shame. But they wouldn't have done it if the system worked in the manner that it was supposed to work, right? So we have to work tirelessly to ensure that we have the confidence in our criminal justice system. Linda and his team, the prosecution, it's important. When they investigate, they need to be thorough so that we win and we are successful in the court of law. My last question is to Uber, right? If there's an incident, lo and behold, it's a rape by one of the drivers, will they be available when they're requested by the courts to come and testify and bring the information?
Sure. All right. I'm going to ask you to take the mic to the lady in the pink. Oh, you already have a mic.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and give us your comment, and I'll give you an opportunity to respond shortly, Yolisa.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Florence Sekolani from Domestic Worker Alliance, also with Black Caucus. My comment is that as domestic workers, we face a lot of violence at our workplace because when you look at it, we work at a private home whereby anything, when it happens, no one can become a witness. And then our bosses, they use us like anything, any furniture that is at home that they can use in any way that they like. Because you cannot say no. Because you are in their home, they can do whatever they want. Because when you look at back again, with this thing of gender-based, it comes back whereby men has treated women as furniture that is being left at home and cherished at home. And now when they see these young women positioning themselves in powerful positions, they become intimidated, that they use and they respond with violence to say, okay, now I'm being taken to a certain position whereby I have to face or maybe being challenged by a woman who I used to live at home. And then now it becomes a threat that women are now being challenged and then violated by men because men at the first place, they were never leaders. They were power seekers, profile seekers, whereby all the attention has been to them because they were the only providers that used to provide for the families. And now they are being challenged by women. It becomes very intimidating to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that view. Dr. Kale?
Mental health and wellness. I think it's so important to really realize that many of us in South Africa as women and children are really living under terror and the threat of violence, and this anticipation that something is going to happen to you is really not a way to live. And the effect or the impact of the trauma lives in the DNA. So 4 generations from now, those children that are born will be born with the consequences and the trauma in their DNA for what we are going through today. So this project is not about the next 2 years or the next 5 years. We really need to realize that prevention methods are key. We need to fund them. We need to really focus on the evidence and do the right things. But most importantly, we need to listen to women. Let women define for themselves what justice is. Because if you are expecting me to perform victimhood and take my children at midnight and out of the home because we are afraid of our perpetrator, when we know in South Africa social services are not, where do I take, again, a lot of women are forced to have dual banking accounts. Is the banking sector and the financial systems in this country enabling of women to just go? Because a lot of us said, why don't you just leave? It's not simple. And why is it women and children who are expected to vacate their homes? Why must we get disturbed and uprooted? Why can't the perpetrators and the police do their job and take perpetrators out of our homes? And we are just literally just surviving at the very edge, and we have normalized the extent of trauma and violence that we live in this country.
Thank you so much for that. I'll take you, ma'am.
I've got 2 questions for the lady from Uber and from the police. Firstly, can I please get a response for this? With Uber, example, with me with disabilities, I use Uber a lot for school and running errands. Most of the time when I use transport, I usually need assistance getting in the car, folding the chair, and then putting it in the boot. When these guys assist us getting into the car, I know how I need to be assisted. I would ask him, you have to help me with this, you hold me here and there. But now when they do that, their hands tend to not hold where they're supposed to. If I'm asking you to hold my knee and nowhere else. I've personally had an incident with an Uber driver, and I've reported it on the app. 2 days after that, my app wasn't working. So I don't know how you guys handle that, but even with our organizations, Disabled Women South Africa, we have like 50% of the women who use this public transport go through that on a daily basis, in the morning and in the evening. So you can imagine how traumatic that is. It now affects your social life and your working life and all of that. Secondly, with the police, with the Special Victims Unit, even when you do the rape test case, is there someone who's specialized to deal with people with disabilities? Because how you would conduct a rape case with someone who doesn't have a disability isn't the same way that you would conduct it with someone with a disability.
Sure.
Now, most of the time there isn't really someone who's equipped to deal with people living with disabilities.
All right. Yolisa?
Sure. I'm really sorry. Let me start with you. The last question, that is, I'm really sorry to hear about your case. We have a product called Uber Assist, and we've trained thousands of our driver partners specifically to handle people with disabilities. Whether it's a person in the car with a guide dog, or an aged person, or a person on a wheelchair, I'd like to take this further because I'd like to understand, was it a normal Uber or was it an Uber Assist? Because I would be really surprised. But having said that, it would be unfortunate that would have gone through the process of training people and we still have such. Again, we have a feedback mechanism. When everything happens or anything happens on the app, you have the ability to report. If you say you've reported and 2 days later your app is not working, that's also interesting. That's something that we'd like to take up because our response time is normally any time from a minute to 24 hours. And it's either done in-app or via email, or we have a 24-hour call center that you can call through. Probably an isolated case, but something that we really would like to look into so that we can make sure that it doesn't happen again. In fact, Cathy, if I may say that where we're going to be training all our driver partners across Sub-Sahara on gender sensitization. Quickly then going to the question, advocate, you know, in any case, you have the rider, you have the driver, and you have the technology. So in an Uber ride, you're able to track the ride from when it starts all the way up until it ends. And all of that information we hand over to law enforcement authorities, and we work in close cooperation with them. We've got highly skilled law enforcement response teams that we work with. So to your question, yes.
All right, that's fantastic. Unfortunately, I'm going to allow the officer to answer the question offline because we've completely run out of time for our conversation. We've pushed it a little bit tonight and extended the conversation by 15 minutes than we had initially said. But let me thank all of the panelists that have been part of our conversation tonight, and of course to also our guests in studio that have contributed to this conversation. So certainly the hope is that as we go through yet another campaign of 16 days of gender-based violence against women and children, that the approach that we have towards the impact of the scourge in society is different, but that ultimately that it makes a change. And that change, I believe, when you look at the figures, begins very close to us. It begins in our homes. It begins in being able to create a safe environment where we have those closest to us, where we can have conversations and really allow those who perhaps are suffering in silence to be able to across the country do that this year. So it's a wrap then from us for tonight. And thank you to the Soul City Institute for Social Justice that has brought us this conversation this evening. My colleague Carmen Reddy is standing by. She's going to be ready to take you then into the rest of the evening right here on Newsroom Africa. Good night.